couldn't do it.
Wait, am I live right now? Are we live? If you guys can see us, let us know. If you can hear us, let us know. Because that was an annoying pile of awfulness.
I don't think so. I don't think you're live.
No? I see me as having been live for 20 seconds.
Someone else had that switch to another channel. Is it starting?
It says I've been live for 11 seconds. I don't know what's going on.
All right, it's working. It's working!
It's working! Hey!
It's working!
Hey, have an intro. Isn't that fun?
I fixed it!
Alright, well, sorry about that. I blame YouTube entirely. Yeah, that was horrible. So, yeah, in case you guys didn't know, YouTube changed up how they're doing live streams like a month ago, and it's been awful. There are a few things I like about it. Like, the interface is a little bit better for, like, you're the one who's streaming interface. But, oh my goodness, everything else about it is just the worst.
Well, I like the intro music.
Yeah, well, because it's awesome intro music. Thanks, Bent.
You're welcome!
Alright. So, this is actually a special request. So, a couple days ago, that sounds about right. Maybe yesterday. I can't keep track of days. Everything is just a blur.
You told me yesterday.
Okay, yeah, I guess it was yesterday. Mr. Archaeopteryx, who I hope is in the chat,
Better be.
said, oh, hey, are you going to do a response to the Whack and Atheist about Richard Dawkins? And I said, I don't know, because I hadn't seen it. And then I watched it. And normally, I'm not someone who's going to go around and like, oh, I'm going to white knight for Richard Dawkins because, one, he doesn't need it, and two, in the areas where he doesn't need it, or sorry, he does need it, it's because he's bad, like philosophy. Richard Dawkins is terrible at philosophy. So, yeah, whatever. But something else interesting happened, which is that some guy who happens to be the head of a Genesis Apologetics is on this video. And I've gone ahead and cut out all of Kent's stuff about like how, oh, hey, we need wood burning stoves or whatever. So if you want to go see what stuff Kent Hovind needs to help him work on Dinosaur Adventureland, feel free to watch the original video. I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that none of you guys are interested in going to give Kent Hovind free parts and labor.
I am.
Oh, then you can watch the original video.
So it was a good video, so you're like, yeah, let's do it. Hey, Bent, do you want to do a Kent with Bent tomorrow that we weren't going to be doing tomorrow? Because we weren't planning on doing one today. I mean, we hadn't discussed it yet, but like, yeah. And I was like, heck yeah, I do, so.
All right, well, let's get going with this. Ready?
I'm ready.
So he did a video.
And I can hear,
somebody
yes.
said,
Nice.
Richard Dawkins, show me the intermediate fossils. And he did one in Nebraska at the Nebraska Museum.
Nebraska vignettes.
Showing
It sounds like a small-time college basketball team.
It does. A really lame mascot.
They're 6-20, trying to win their 7th game. They lost by 44. All right.
Yeah, YouTube is starting to remind me of Fallout 76 sometimes. I don't want to start on
Do
it.
with Kent. You should do a Bent with Kent. Take like take my 45-second Rubik's Cube video and just like critique it with Kent Hovind.
I guess I could ask him.
He told me it took 9 takes to get it right. He can do it, but it's hard without looking.
Evolution. And here's him standing by there. I'm going to get ready to play the video of him talking. And then Dan, you've been studying this intently. Introduce yourself quickly. Well, Steve, you can call up the video here of the Richard Dawkins.
Sure. Yeah,
okay.
my name is Dr. Dan Biddle. I'm the president of Genesis Apologetics. We are a biblical creation ministry, and Kent, a lot of your work was quite instrumental in me trusting the historicity of Genesis about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, so one thing is, not that long ago, Kent Hovind was doing some stuff with, like, he had a green screen, and he had, like, a video, like, inset that an editor had put in there, and he had, like, fancy, like, depth of field effects going. And now he's back to just looking at a monitor that he's put in frame. and talking to someone on the phone, on speakerphone, and capturing it with an external mic. What is going on with Kent's production qualities? Because they are all over the place. Get a voice chat thing, and get Discord or Skype or Streamlabs or something. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and where are you located and what do you do?
Yeah, we're in Sacramento, California area, and our biblical creation ministry provides training mostly to students. We speak in private schools, churches, homeschool associations, but our real heart is trying to put a lot of this stuff out on the internet. We have about 100,000 subscribers now on YouTube, and we put out a lot of content dealing with the creation evolution topics.
Okay, and what's the website they can get hold of your stuff again? Dan, how do they get a hold of your stuff? What's your website?
See?
Yeah. Sorry, Kent, I think you broke up just a little bit. Can you hear me all right?
Is this a live
stream? I can hear you just fine. Genesis Apologetics, is that the name of your website?
Because they could have edited this out, I guess.
Yep, they can go to Genesis Apologetics.
But why edit it out when you can
have two different programs there. One is called Debunking Evolution, and it's a skit-based video program primarily designed for 5th to 10th graders. And then we have another website called The 7 Myths. You spell out the number 7.
Okay, remember that skit-based thing? That's what I've been doing. So, yeah. Oh yeah, and he's definitely a doctor. He's got a white coat on. Oh, that's a very nice mug you got there.
It's way better than the one I just saw that said Hovind's name on it.
So just go to 7myths.com, and that program is for junior and seniors in high school all the way up through college. And we take a look at the 7 main myths that are taught in a lot of the more liberal-leaning Christian colleges and seminaries and all secular schools, and we address those 7. They're all from a biblical worldview perspective.
Yeah, so in Nestle 20 asked about the coat. So he wears these in his whack and atheist things, which normally have a higher production quality than this. But he always, or not always, but he almost always starts them out looking into a microscope that has, one side has a little camera to capture images, and the other side just has the eyepiece. He makes a joke about how he can't find any brain cells from any of these atheist evolutionists.
Effective.
All right, now I watched the video that your ministry did on whale evolution and debunking the idiot idea that 1,000-pound cow turned into a 300,000-pound whale.
That is an idiot idea. I agree with you, because no one hypothesizes cows as ancestral to whales, because both of them are very recent forms comparatively.
Yeah.
By losing. It's silly.
It's incredible, Kent. I mean, and it gets even better. I mean, you can go. Some people think it goes back to a cow, a 1,000-pound cow, but actually, most theorists now would start it back to an artiodactyl that was maybe.
I like how cows are artiodactyls, but he's just gonna use that big word because their audience doesn't know what an artiodactyl is.
Be 100-pound, cloven-hoofed creature, and if they say, well, it could have been a wolf-like creature.
Brandon Worrell, there is some whale sex, I promise. Came for whale sex? I mean, there's not any, explicit on-screen whale sex, but there's definitely a discussion of whale. Don't worry.
Or some people say it was a bear, hippopotamus, or even an antelope. So it's definitely an imaginary creature that they link it back to, but somehow that little imaginary creature...
What's imaginary about artiodactyls? I mean, there's a lot of artiodactyls out there. They're real. There's whales, there's hippos, there's deer, there's giraffe, there's pigs. These are all artiodactyls.
What just happened?
Spawned off and evolved into 13 whale...
Oh, and for $5 from Ben Hovind, let's get this donation train rolling. Thanks, Ben.
What just happened?
About 79 different species of whales, with, of course, the biggest one being a blue whale at 360,000 pounds. So it's quite a far-fetched theory.
All right, I'm going to play Richard Dawkins. It's only 2 minutes long, and you stop me whenever you'd like, because he's going to say, here's the evidence right here, and he's going to give these names, and the average kid in high school is going to say, oh, this is Sir Richard Dawkins. He's been knighted. He's got a doctor's degree.
I feel like Kent Hovind vastly overestimates how much the average American high schooler thinks that being knighted in England is a thing.
I think it's pretty cool.
Oh, hey, an unintrigued feline. By the way, please do like the video because that also helps.
He teaches evolutionary biology. Wow, he must know what he's talking about. Well, there's no question he's got a high IQ and he's very smart in some areas, but he's willingly ignorant of the creation. He's a fool on this area, and I'm going to whack him tonight. So help me out. I'm going to play the 2-minute, 30-second clip, and you tell me when to stop when you'd like to interject something. All right, Dan?
Sounds great.
All right, here he goes.
Here we go.
People often say, where are the intermediate fossils? Show us your intermediate fossils. There are plenty of intermediate fossils, and one of the best examples is whales. The modern whales are up there. Here's a series of fossils. Back in time, Dorodon, about 36.
First of all, Mr. Dawkins, let me whack you with a little science and knowledge.
Ooh.
These are not fossils you're pointing to. These are pictures. These are not fossils. These are imaginary creatures that you imagine.
Well, no, first, you're right that those are not fossils. Those are pictures. Just like, this is not my wife, this is just a picture of her, Kent. Yeah, I know. And granted, they're not even pictures of the fossils. However, they're not imaginary. They are reconstructions based on the fossil. So, give me a second here. Alright, so I'm going to pull up a picture. And I'm gonna ask you some questions about this animal. Once I get a good picture of it. Okay, man?
You're gonna ask me questions?
Yeah. Ask you
now
some
I
questions.
feel like I'm put on the spot.
So this is the skeleton of an animal.
I don't think so. I think it's a picture of a skeleton of an animal.
That's fair. That's true. But you know, do you think this animal has when it was alive? Would it have fur?
Sure.
Scales?
Why not?
Fur or scales?
I would guess fur.
Okay. Do you think it was bipedal or quadrupedal?
Quadrupedal.
Okay. Think it had claws or blunt, stubby fingers?
I think those are claws.
Okay.
I don't know.
Think it maybe had...
Looks like a bear to me. Is that what a bear would look like?
Yeah, that's a bear.
Okay.
So, if you were to draw what you thought this creature would look like, you'd probably draw it looking mostly like a bear, even if you didn't know it was a bear.
I mean, to me, yeah, it resembles a bear, and you said that it is, but it was a guess. I didn't know that.
Right. But still, so, if I asked you to draw this, you probably would have come up with something.
I would have drawn
a bear.
Well, I can't draw, but like if I could, I would have drawn a bear.
Right. So, but what if I took away about half of the bones on either side, but not the same bones on both sides all the time?
I mean, where I could extrapolate that it was probably a symmetrical life
Still
form.
Probably come up with a bear, right?
It'd be less likely, but I think it'd be pretty likely.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that reconstructions are somewhat speculative. Like, you're not going to get everything right when you do a reconstruction of an extinct animal. And the more that you have of the animal, the more you're going to get right. That's true. But you're not just making things up when you do a life reconstruction fossil.
This is not science, so pay attention, son.
Million years ago, Rhodocetus about 47.5 million years, Pachycetus about 48.5 million years. And you can see they form a lovely series of intermediates.
Kent's going to go over his minutes.
Series of intermediates.
What?
Kent's going to go over his minutes. He's going to be on this phone call for a long time.
Maybe he's using Wi-Fi calling.
Maybe.
You drew the pictures and drew a line between them. Dan, they...
It's not even a line. It's a dotted line, Kent. You
it's idiot. A line.
I know. And I will also agree that this chart... Okay, look. Dawkins should not have used it. I know it was probably handy wherever it was he was, which I guess Nebraska or whatever, but this is not a great chart. It really should show all of these animals as coming off as other branches from the whale line, I guess, because that's how we do cladograms, but...
Yeah, but like if you say he's just simplifying it, at what point? Because anytime you simplify, it's technically going to be wrong, or to some degree at least.
That's true.
You know, at what point? Who is he explaining this for?
What's the?
I don't know. High schoolers to look at. Like I think it's trying to explain the general idea, and it's not going to get all the details.
And I'm not sure who the target audience is for Dawkins either. It could actually be school kids because there's a lot of like high school level lectures and demonstrations and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know.
Do this all the time, as if that's part of science.
That's a good point. I mean, we could belabor that issue. We could talk about the millions of years dating that they have and everything. It's really incredible. But there is a good stopping point coming up when he talks about how the cute little limbs and pelvis have just retracted themselves automatically and become vestigial over millions of years. I think he's just about to get to it.
All right.
I hate how he phrases that. They retracted themselves automatically.
Automatically.
Like some whale was born with fully formed hind limbs, and then it just kind of sucked them up into its body, and then all of its kids had.
The whale was like, I didn't control that. It happened automatically.
Right.
Oh, hey, Maya.
Hey, Maya's here. Don't worry about being late.
Pachycetus, Rhodocetus, gradually losing the...
Maya. Happy birthday. Everyone say happy birthday to Maya in the chat.
Happy birthday, Maya.
Happy birthday to Maya. Maya is turning, I think, 25 or something? Something like that.
26.
26? Okay.
26, yes.
No.
hind legs,
fairly certain.
Dorodon, which has almost lost the hind legs completely. Modern whales have completely lost the hind legs. There are some vestigial bones, some remnant bones buried deep inside the body.
Yeah, we can stop it right there. So that is probably some of the most embarrassing arguments that evolutionists still continue to make. And I'm going to use an analogy. So an analogy would be, we all know about the famous Lucy fossil.
Vandalia 1998 for $1.99, thank you, says, the chart needs to be even simpler for these two. It wouldn't help. They are intentionally misunderstanding these charts, is the problem. An unidentified Leviathan says, when you make up a live reconstruction, don't just make stuff up. Do not say if its nostrils were situated on top of his head. Also, happy birthday, Maya. Yeah, well, so, to some extent, you have to make some things up, right? So, like, if you have a cranium but no lower jaw, I mean, the animal had a lower jaw. Chances that you found, like, the first animal with no lower jaw are pretty slim. Well, the first, you know, craniate with no lower jaw. Or, I don't remember at what point jaws are part of the phylogeny, but you know what I mean. Found a mammal skull with no jaw, like it had one. So you can fill in gaps, and then there's also always going to be some kinds of speculation, like what color was it and whatever. But your speculation should always be reasonable, and you shouldn't use your speculative features as evidence. You can't say like, oh, hey, this animal was so good at hiding in the woods because of the stripes I drew on it. Why'd you draw those stripes?
Oh, because it would help it hide in the woods.
Right, yeah, so don't do that. But, yeah, when you're making the life reconstruction, you're going to have to infer something. Let's be reasonable about it.
Which is the leading supposed icon proving that humans evolved from ape-like creatures millions of years ago. And to this day, in exhibits around the world, they still have Lucy's thoracic vertebrae right below her skull, which is a little vertebrae that they now know and widely admit did not belong to Australopithecines. It belonged to a Theropithecus, an extinct baboon.
Yep. But hey, I have a thing about that already pulled up because, well, spoilers, I did watch some of this.
Not me.
Yeah.
I always go into these blind. Always.
Okay, so here is what was found that turns out to have been a baboon. It's not even a vertebra, it's just the neural arch of a vertebra. Okay. I'm sorry, but that little piece being misidentified doesn't invalidate everything else about this whole skeleton. See if I can zoom in on this, huh? Yeah. That little neural arch not being part of Lucy's skeleton just means nothing except that, hey, baboons, also being primates, are pretty hard to tell apart from, well, human line ancestors when it comes to things like their vertebrae. Not sure how this is evidence against evolution. And it's like, this wasn't even a whole vertebra either. If it had been the whole vertebra, it probably would have been easier to figure out. But basically, the determination was made that, hey, it seems a bit small, so they looked a little bit closer at it, and yeah, it turns out it was a baboon. This tiny little fragment here. And I think later they're going to go on about how, oh, all the museums still have that bone in there. It's like, well, Okay, I'm sorry that not every museum has updated their Lucy display to take out this one little neural arch. I don't know. Museum displays aren't where we get our science from. Not the peer-reviewed literature. Yeah.
But you go into museums across the world and they still proudly display her only thoracic vertebrae sitting there right underneath.
It wasn't her only thoracic vertebrae. Ben, how many? Didn't you see a bunch of thoracic vertebrae there?
3 or 4, I think, that I saw.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a whole vertebra. It was just the neural arch that was supposed to have come from one of her thoracic vertebrae.
Her head and say, look, that belongs to Lucy, but now most paleontologists know that it doesn't. And it's the same thing with the vestigial hip bones of whales. You can pick up any high school biology textbook today, and the vast majority of them will claim that whales have these vestigial claspers or hip structures that they used to have millions of years ago that they no longer need.
No. Okay, look, I can't speak for every textbook, right? But again, textbooks aren't where you get your science from. Unfortunately, they aren't often as up-to-date as they should be. In fact, I heard someone say that they looked into it and textbooks tended to be somewhere around 20 years out of date, which is just ridiculous to me, but whatever. But anyway, no one is saying that whales don't need their hip bone. What they're saying is that they're vestigial because they don't function as hips. They don't help support the weight by being a pelvic girdle that supports the lower or the hind limbs. Can't say lower limbs if it's a quadruped. Yeah, that's why they're vestigial, because they don't function for the same reason that pelvises typically function. It's primarily to support the animal's weight, or at least some of its weight. Usually, the pectoral girdle also supports. Not humans though, because humans are weirdos, and I guess not in dinosaurs like me either.
Weirdo. Fellow
but
weirdo.
Then the most embarrassing article came out in November 2014 in the journal called the Journal of Evolution, and they admitted in the article is titled "The Sexual Selection Targets Simian Pelvic Bones." You can go out and.
Oh hey, look!
What?
Sexual selection targets cetacean pelvic bones. What is this? Is this the article?
What? Is that peer-reviewed?
It is! Let's just read the abstract. Male genitalia evolve rapidly, probably as a result of sexual selection. Whether this pattern extends to the internal infrastructure that influences genital movement remains unknown. Cetaceans, whales, and dolphins offer a unique opportunity to test this hypothesis. Evolving from land-dwelling ancestors, they lost their external hind limbs and evolved a highly reduced pelvis, which seems to serve no other function except to anchor muscles that maneuver the penis. So first, they're not saying it's not a vestigial penis already, or a vestigial pelvis. Yeah. And we're in what, the second sentence? Okay, here we create a novel morphometric pipeline to analyze the size and shape of evolution of pelvic bones from 130 individuals from 29 species in the context of inferred mating systems. Present two main findings. One, males from species with relatively intense sexual selection inferred by their relative testes size have evolved relatively large penises and pelvic bones compared to their body size. And two, pelvic bone shape diverges more quickly in species pairs that have diverged in inferred mating system. Neither pattern was observed in the anteriormost pair of vertebral ribs, which served as a negative control. This study provides evidence that sexual selection can affect internal anatomy that controls male genitalia. These important functions may explain why cetacean pelvic bones have not been lost through evolutionary time. So, far from being a refutation of the idea that these bones are vestigial pelvic bones, this is just an examination of how their current function is selected for via sexual selection. So, I don't know why anyone would think that this would be support for their idea. I mean, yeah, that's not a pelvis, really. I mean, I know it is a pelvis, but I mean, think about this. This tiny little thing here, right here, yeah, that's clearly vestigial as a pelvis. So, yeah. Any other cool pictures? Whole thing, but oh hey, look, we got whale pelvises. Nice. Got whale ribs. How they did. Look at all this stuff. Oh, hey! Ben, I didn't know you were a scientist.
I'm not just a scientist. I'm also a doctor.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, everybody, say hello to Dr. Bent Hovind, the real Dr. Hovind.
Yeah. No, this is the wrong number. You have the wrong number.
Yeah. So yeah, I went and checked the paper that he said to go check. It didn't help his cause at all.
Anyone can read it themselves.
You're right. Anyone can read it themselves. I did.
They have now completely redacted that position and said, actually, they're not vestigial hips or pelvis structures.
It calls them vestigial hips and pelvic structures in the paper, in the abstract to the paper. Yeah. And for $4.99, thank you very much, Mandalia 1998. I talked about how school can't keep up with science in my science education podcast that I did with Bill Ludlow before he passed. I haven't seen that. I'm gonna have to try and check that out. Could you send me something on Discord or something about where to find that? Because I would be interested to see that. Because I'm still a little disappointed that I never got to do my interview with Bill, because it was scheduled for a week and a half after he passed, and I didn't even know that he was in poor health. So yeah, I would be interested to see some new Ludlow material that I hadn't seen. Ben, you met him too, right?
I did meet him. I didn't know who he was until after I met him. But I met him at the museum in Mesa. Yeah. And yeah, he had a lot of cool things to say about Kent Hovind.
Well, I had some not so cool things to say about some of Kent Hovind's support. In case you don't know, some of the people who support Kent Hovind are the kind of people who will file a false trademark for your business name in order to try and get you basically lose your livelihood because you beat Kent Hovind in a debate. So that's the kind of people that follow Kent Hovind. Or at least not all of them. I'm sure some of them are perfectly nice people. I was one at one point. Some of them are very nasty.
Little legs that have tucked themselves back in over millions of years. They're mating claspers that provide the structure and mechanism for these creatures to reproduce.
Ooh, potato.
And if you take these claspers away, they would stop reproducing in the very next generation.
Yeah, but they're still vestigial pelvises, including in the paper that you cited as evidence that they weren't. I think what happens is that creationists don't expect their fellow creationists to look up the papers, because let's be honest, I don't think anyone thinks that this is directed externally. None of this is directed at people who aren't already creationists to try to get them to become creationists. It's basically never. At least not if you're already well-informed about the subject of evolution. As you become more and more well-informed, you become more and more likely to never become a creationist.
So here we have Richard Dawkins that is not even reading their own journal called Evolution, which now has completely redacted that position, and they now understand these are not vestigial structures. These things have purpose and intent, and whales and dolphins could not reproduce without them.
Dan, I
need to pull that back up again. Let's see. So they don't call them vestigial structures anymore. Is that what he said? I want to make sure that I get this. Vestigial. For highly reduced state. Sometimes thought of as use messages. Maybe they don't call them vestigial in here. Possible. They are highly reduced, which is basically the definition of vestigial, though. So I might be able to give them that this paper doesn't call them vestigial.
Not directly.
Yep.
Maybe not directly.
But they're definitely pelvises, which this guy has said repeatedly that they're not. In fact, I have a whole video explaining why they are pelvises.
It's a good video.
Yeah, I believe it's called A Whale's Tale of Evo Devo. Check it out. Someone can find a link, put it in the chat.
Holding one in my hand that I got when I was up in Alaska, where whales wash up on the beach from time to time. This is part of the male reproductive system. I don't want to be too far off base here on public TV, but the male's penis is 15 feet long. They have to...
Does Kent think he's on public TV?
I don't know if Kent thinks so. Who knows?
I mean, he just said he was on public TV. I think he might think that this is a TV station he's broadcasting.
He might think that. He might think that.
Exactly. Maybe he's been getting into those apricot seeds.
He used to be on TV.
And by the way, Mr. Archaeopteryx, you are welcome. You were the person who asked for it, and now you got it.
Yeah, deal with it. I mean, wait, yeah.
To mate in the dark, underwater, with no arms, and they can't talk and say, "Scoot over, honey." This has nothing whatsoever to do with walking on land.
It does.
This has to do...
It doesn't have anything to do with walking on land anymore, Kent. Anymore. It's like ostrich claws. What are ostrich claws for, Kent? They're not for catching prey, I can guarantee you. Have you guys seen an ostrich claw? Ostrich.
It doesn't work, but I could be like...
Okay.
I probably shouldn't mock Kent.
Why?
Not his actions. Maybe his words. I should play fair.
Okay, so... Alright, check this out. This is an ostrich hand. It's got 2 claws. But here's the funny thing about ostrich hands. They don't actually have the tendons or musculature to do anything other than fold up against the body. Ostriches literally can't do anything with these claws. Okay? There's still claws. Now, a whale can't do anything about walking on this pelvis. But that doesn't make it not a pelvis. And the reason we know it's a pelvis is because it develops as a pelvis develops. Embryologically. So I don't know what the point is of saying that these have nothing to do with walking currently, because they're all still obviously pelvises. They develop, medial to the anterior limb buds. It's fancy talk for their pelvises.
With making baby whales. Like you said, it has purpose and function, had blood supply, nerve supply. This is part of their reproductive system. And for Richard Dawkins to say, this is proof that it used to have hind legs. Richard, you need to get whacked. It is not a hind leg. And going from having legs to not having legs would be losing something, not gaining something.
And
to go from a tail like a cow or a dog would have, a whip-like tail, which goes side to side generally, to a whale fluke, which goes up and down, this is so ludicrous to think there's any relation.
And also, the paper does say it should be noted that some cetacean species retain internal femurs. Yep. In fact, actually, I believe the whale skeleton that I used for that video had a femur. And or tibiae, which is rare, and in extremely rare cases, individuals develop external hind limbs. Yeah, actually, you can find, if you search, I think it's vestigial hind limb dolphin or something, you can actually find some pictures of dolphins.
And I point out, no fossils count as evidence for evolution. None. Because you can't prove that those bones had any children at all. Anyway, anything else on this?
So here's the thing, right? There are 2 ways to gain evidence that don't require you to prove that much about the fossil. One is post-dictions, and the other one is prediction. Post-diction is when you look at data that's already been discovered and realize that a particular theory or group of related theories are the only ones that make sense out of a data set. Otherwise, they are just unrelated noise that can't easily be explained. Another way is predictions, where you say, if this theory is true, we should find X. Whale fossils fall into the prediction. When, before evolution was, proposed, no one had any predictions about whales. Then later, people predicted that whales probably evolved from land animals. And so it was predicted that animals with the characteristics of whales, which are primarily found in the inner ear and near the jaw, would also be found in animals from a few million years ago that were land animals. Then they did find them.
What?
That's evidence, because it's a fulfilled prediction, a prediction that we wouldn't expect to be true if not for evolution. So, like I always say, wake me up when the creationists predict a fossil that evolution wouldn't predict and then actually find it. That'd be cool. That would be actual evidence for creation.
So should I keep going?
You know, I think there's just one more generic comment I want to make before we get into the specific icons that he's got there, is that there have been all...
Vandali 1998 for $1.99. Kent is right. Bones can't have kids. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
All kinds of evolutionists that have come out and said, you know what, we have no idea how the changes in morphology and function between artiodactyls, which is like the hippopotamus or the antelopes that these things supposedly came from, could possibly evolve into whale-like creatures. In fact, one guy, Dr. Sternberg, has said there's not even enough evolutionary time to go from some form of a land mammal into whales because of all the different changes that they have to do. In fact, our book has a list of 21 different changes that you have to do to go from a land creature to a whale. Obviously.
How many changes does it get to be before it's too many? And I mean, and the other thing is, like, this is a list of things like, oh, a nose to a blowhole. Like, I've read this list before. I don't remember most of it. But it's a very long list. It's like, okay, yeah, but all of these things are things that can develop incrementally and that there's variation of it in different animals. So which one of these is a problem and why can't they all be worked on simultaneously? Like, evolution doesn't go through, it's like, okay, I need to take this one creature and move its nose to the top of its head as a blowhole. Okay, now that that's done, let's add a tail fluke. And oh, okay, now that that's done, let's reduce the limb size. Okay, now that that's done, now let's work on, I don't know, breech birth position. Like, yeah. All of these things keep going all at the same time.
But that's very unlikely to happen in 6,000 years, right?
Oh, that's true. It's a good thing we have a lot longer
Which
than that.
is the point, yeah, and that's the point. Like, even so, it was longer than 6,000 years, a lot longer. So, I mean, there's a lot of time that these minor changes happened.
Yeah.
Over which these minor changes happened. That's all I got.
Okay.
It's like you have to have a fetus now in breech position. You have to nurse your young underneath the water. You have to have a very novel muscle system around your blowholes. You have to develop change.
Blowholes muscle systems aren't that novel. Most animals can consciously close or open their nostrils. Humans are kind of weird in not being able. Yeah, you're using the same muscles that a whale uses on. That's a thing. That man.
Just
I can't close, but I can
see underneath water. You have to change your ear bones. You have to decouple your esophagus from your trachea. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It makes way more sense that these creatures were breathed into existence by God himself on the 5th day of creation, way more than some long, slow evolutionary process, because you've got 21 distinct changes that have to happen to go between a mammal, and a whale. And it's
Could you go between a mammal and a whale? Dude, whales are mammals. $20 from Mr. Archaeopteryx. Bill Ludlow pointed out that individuals represent populations and asked Hovind to give an example of an individual that wasn't a part of a population. Hovind's answer was Tom Hanks on that movie where he was on an island. I remember that. Wilson! Oh my goodness. And the thing was that, yes, he wasn't part of a local population, but he was a part of a population. He had parents. He had contemporary humans that were of the same species.
Oh, man.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the Bill Ludlow Kent Hovind debate, I'm going to pull it up right now and get a link in the chat. Give me a second. Alright, yeah, here we go. This is on the Steve McRae channel. This is from July 14th, 2017, so half years ago or so. about. Yeah. Here is a link to that. Watch this after this stream. It is one of Kent's worst performances ever, and it is one of the best performances from a opponent. Every once in a while, I have someone say that, like, oh, I think you did better than Bill Ludlow. I'm like, I don't agree with that. Because Bill was great in that. If you haven't seen it, and you are at all interested in watching people just absolutely annihilate Kent.
It's just straight impossible.
Well, the thing you said about disconnecting the trachea, this is something a lot of people don't realize. Whales breathe through the top of their head straight into their lungs, and they can breathe and eat at the same time because the mouth goes into the stomach and it's not connected to their lungs or their... We have one hole, your mouth, brings in the air and the food, and then you have an epiglottis to separate the two to go into the stomach or go into the lungs. How's it going to survive the transition between that and where's...
What do you mean, how's it going to survive the transition? What's the problem that he is seeing here?
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't...
It doesn't make any sense. His question makes no sense. What part of the transition is going to kill you?
Because the whole time, you're basically just separating two tubes out. And sure, for some of that time, you're still going to have a linked esophagus and trachea, but that's just the normal condition for mammals, and they don't seem to die from it.
Yeah, I'm not dying because it's just shared tube.
I mean, to be fair, some mammals do. Choking is actually a fairly common cause of death. I mean, it is a problem for mammals. And for, I mean, tetrapods in general. But, like, it's not an insurmountable problem. I don't see how separating these... And yeah, only some cetaceans have that. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on whale respiration. Nestle 20, I don't think you're wrong. I just might be right. I looked up just now some diagrams of cetacean respiratory systems, and at least some of them do seem to have trachea separated from the esophagus. Again, I am unclear as to why this is some kind of problem where the transition from one to the other would... I think Kent's just saying that because...
Does it, though?
It does to his audience.
The evidence. This is pure fantasy land.
That's a great point.
Yeah, where's the evidence? I'm sorry that there aren't a lot of fossil whale trachea. The world isn't perfect. The fact that you don't know how one thing evolved doesn't mean that other things didn't, or even that that thing didn't. Because that's just an argument from ignorance. Like, if 300 years ago someone said, oh gee, I don't know how lightning is formed, so it must be Thor, it doesn't actually make it Thor.
And some of these evolutionists are throwing up their hands saying, you know what, for this to really happen, to go from mammals to whales with these 21 distinct major changes in how they live and act, you would need to have thousands and thousands of in-between examples demonstrating the evolution and progression of each of these 21 things, and they just don't have it. They're completely missing.
Even if they had a fossil that was intermediate, like I said, no fossils would count. You can't prove those bones had...
Hey, Beach Price, welcome.
...any children. And why can't any animals today produce other than their kind? Where's an example of one living that we can watch? I mean, farmers have watched a whole lot of critters be born. None have been different. Cows produce cows. Dogs produce dogs. No exceptions.
You know, when people write up the book of Genesis as myth, I say, look, let's just start with the first chapter. It says in the first chapter, 10 times after their kind. Let them produce after their kind. And animals produced after their kind. So is there any way that God could have been more clear? He was incredibly clear. Right. And that what he said there has stood fast over thousands of years of supposed scientific progression. So he said it once, and he was right when he said it.
And 10 more times in the flood story. Bring them onto the ark after their kind. All right.
Yeah, no matter how many times the word kind is in the Bible, it neither gives scientific evidence for the existence of these things, nor does it help you define them in a way that could make your statements about one kind turning into another kind meaningful. The Bible could literally just be full from one end to the other with the statement God created them after their kinds, and it wouldn't actually help you.
I have a question. If dogs produce dogs and whales produce whales and all that, these animals produce after their kind, how does that conflict with evolution?
Oh, it doesn't. It's actually a prediction.
Oh, interesting. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. If they didn't do that, that would be a falsification of evolution.
It's almost like they're trying to set up a straw man and bash it down, but they're not even doing that correctly.
Yeah, no, they're being extremely bad.
Let me continue here.
Fantastic.
Richard says here, this is a lovely series of intermediates. He likes this evolution theory because it gets rid of God for now.
Even if he does like it for that reason, that's not a reason not to believe. It's just an argument from consequence. X can't be true because if it is, then some bad thing will happen. It's like saying, well, I can't have cancer because then I might die. It's like, well, that doesn't make you not have cancer.
Hey, my cancer went away. Awesome.
Yeah, I know. That's not how this works, Ken. Even if it's true that belief in evolution means there's no God, which it isn't. And even if it's true that not believing in God means that people are just going to be horrible and evil to each other, which isn't true. And even if it's true, that would mean that everyone would go to hell, which it's not true. That's what that means. It still wouldn't make evolution false. That's not how anything works.
Richard, you don't have much time. You'll be facing God one of these days. And I would be willing to predict you'll be dead for a really long time. All right, let me finish here.
I think evolution would predict that too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the problems with a lot of creationists is that they're like, oh, hey, this thing that is a prediction of evolution totally proves evolution wrong. And on the other hand, I would believe evolution if this thing that would prove evolution wrong were to happen. Well, then you're completely backwards.
It just shows they don't understand evolution.
They don't. Well, and the thing is, most people
It's a
don't.
pretty complicated thing.
Yeah, most people
I don't understand it. I understand parts of it.
Right. You certainly understand it better than you did, say, 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure.
A lovely series of intermediates getting progressively more and more specialized in living in the sea.
He just says it like it's a fact, getting more and more specialized at living in the sea.
That's because those animals are more and more specialized for living in the sea. I mean, they just are.
Do you realize just changing from drinking fresh water to drinking salt water would be a pretty major change?
Yeah, but the salt water, or the marine iguana of the Galapagos Island does it, but it's still just an iguana, Kent, so, I mean, it's within your idea of evolution within kind, isn't it? Is iguana a kind? Well, that's the thing, I don't know. I think he would probably say it's a kind, but then if I pointed out that iguanas have evolved within their kind the ability to drink salt water, so it's not a problem for evolution, then he'd probably start playing games with what the iguana kind is.
That's so true.
All right, tell me when you want me to stop again here, Dan.
Okay.
If you look at Pachycetus, which is an old fossil whale, you see that the nostril is just about where you'd expect the nostril to be, near the tip of the snout. If we move on a million years...
Yeah, let's go ahead and stop there.
Oh, wait, no, that wasn't for me to stop. That was for Ken to stop.
Pachycetus is very interesting. Pachycetus simply just means whale.
I'm positive, like, well.
And it was originally found by this guy by the last name of Gingrich in 1980. He finds a few skull fragments, and he jumps up and says, this is a perfect intermediate between land animals and whales. And Gingrich is one of the leading experts, supposedly, on whale evolution. But 10 years later, after they find the initial finding in 1980, they find a few more bones, and they completely backed out of that position and changed and said, you know what, it now looks like, and they published this in the one of evolutionists' leading journal called Nature, and said it now looks like they were no more amphibious than a tapir. And a tapir is a modern browsing animal that lives in South America, but they're now saying that
that lives in the Amazon basin in South America and spends a lot of time swimming. So, as animals go, tapirs are actually fairly amphibious. They're not as amphibious as Pachycetus was originally thought to be, I'll grant you. But they're not exactly, just old land animals. Like, yeah. Also, tapirs are closely related to rhinos. Like rhinos.
that these creatures, based upon the latest fossils that they found, were actually runners moving with only their digits touching the ground.
Yeah, that's because they're artiodactyls. Artiodactyls are ungulates. Ungulates are so called because they run on the tips of their toes, or their unguals, which is to say the claw bones. There's a reason that they ran with only the tips of their toes touching the ground, like a cow or a deer or an antelope. It's because, like all those animals, they're artiodactyls. So anything else would be a surprise. This isn't some kind of great revelation. This is a prediction of evolution. If whales are artiodactyls and they evolved from artiodactyl ancestors, their artiodactyl ancestors should have been unguligrade as ungulates.
That's a quote from the latest journal, and then to make it even worse, in the year 2000, 20 years
to make it worse like that made it bad.
Find, he now changed his position and said, you know what, I don't think it was really Pakicetus, it was that whales are now coming from antelopes.
Well, no, they're not coming from antelopes. And even if he said that, he's just wrong, because the genetic tree is pretty clear that antelopes split, well, the group of artiodactyls that would become antelopes split pretty early on from the group of artiodactyls that become hippos and whales. So I don't know what he may or may not have said, but Pakicetus was definitely an archaeus. Its jaw joint, sigmoid process of the cranium, and the shape of its inner ear bones, which actually we found. So there you go.
So this all proves that the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge.
Right.
And my son, who knows nothing about
I feel like the premises or the conclusion does not follow the premises in that statement.
Even if all of those things were true, and even if they all disproved evolution, that doesn't then prove that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether or not it is. I'm just going to say that that's not a valid argument for. So,
nothing about tapers, but trust God's word, knows more about whales than leading experts do, because the fear of God is the beginning of his knowledge base.
The fact that you think that because your son is just he automatically knows more about whales and fossil whales than the actual experts who spend decades studying these things is just a sign of massive amounts of ignorance, and probably that you have a pretty serious case of the effect. Like, I can't imagine, even at height of my being a creationist, imagining that some little kid knew more than the evolutionary experts about the animals they were studying. I might have thought their interpretations about a few things were off, but like, can your son identify a whale skull? Does he know anything about whale anatomy? Because the answer is probably no.
So here we have 20 years of fossil findings, very, very limited, scant fossils of these things called Pakicetus. And over 20 years, they changed the position on it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, because, science updates with data. Scary, I know. Go with the first thing they learned.
So it's very, very unreliable science. The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge.
Well, again, they found a few fragments of the skull. They found some bones in the dirt. You can't prove this had any children. Certainly you can't prove it had different children. You can't prove it had children that lived.
You said this like 8 times, Ken.
So
just
even if it is, what somebody, I would say a tricycle is halfway between a bicycle and a car. Well, because it's got 3 wheels. I mean, you could draw a line between them and say, see how the car evolved from a bike?
And maybe if bicycles and cars and tricycles actually went around assembling them, new little baby bicycles and tricycles, and the babies were a bit different, you could show a reason as to why there might be selection pressure for more wheels in certain lines of these reproducing wheeled vehicles, then actually that might be an interesting reason to say that maybe bicycles evolved into cars.
It's not that's stupid. Tricycles are tricycles. How big did they guess Pakicetus was? Full grown, dressed out. What size animal was this?
I think about 100 pounds.
About 100 pounds. And what's a blue whale weigh?
Yeah, so it was like a wolf-like mammal.
Okay.
Wolf-like skull fragments, but it had nothing to do with being any kind of a whale creature, because that study that they published in the journal Nature said that it was a runner moving with only their digits touching the ground. So this thing is so far away from being a whale or even swimming around in the water because it ran so fast, only its fingers touched the ground.
Dan, do you have any...
What in the world could that...
It doesn't mean that it's ran all that fast. I mean, it probably did run really fast, but, like, it makes it seem like the reason that only the fingers are touching the ground is because it has such a fast gait. Only the fingers get to touch the ground, and that if it was walking slowly, well, it would walk on its palms? No. Like, pigs
are probably just trying to sneak. It was being all sneaky.
I don't. But, like, you look at, like, pigs. Like, they're not super fast animals. They're not slow, but, like, they're no antelope. They also walk with only their fingers touching the ground. Ooh. What? I don't understand why he's making such a deal out of them basically being artiodactyls as predicted.
I know. Do you have any kind of theory? Any kind of theory? Why does Richard believe this and teach this?
Oh, I know. Because he's not an idiot.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
You know, I think I believe firmly in Romans 1 and 2 Peter 3 that talk about people are willingly ignorant.
Right.
And also, you know, the 2 Peter 3 also prophesies, it says in the end days, people are going to come denying a spontaneous creator and creation and a cataclysmic flood.
And $1.99 from Vandalia. Thank you for the super chat. I had to lock up my bike because it kept having sex. Well, gotta be careful for those reproducing bikes. You never know, you don't want a pregnant bike on your hands. Man, they get all off balance once they get pregnant.
And that's exactly what we're seeing. There's a spiritual phenomenon to this.
Can you pause for a second? So the audio has gone out for me on this video.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, it has.
Call back. And I'll
all right, I'm going to hang up and call back.
All right. Ben's going to call back because apparently Skype is being a jerk. I don't know. So, yeah. Oh, here it is. Hey, hey. All right, let's share my screen with you.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. It happens. It happens.
Oh, I'm apologizing to the chat. I don't care if you're upset about it.
All right. Well, I'm sure the chat understands.
We'll see.
That's much deeper than a secular argument. So he's blind like any other evolutionist is blind, and it's sad. And I think prayer can open doors and open eyes, but for right now, Mr. Dawkins is blind. He's not seeing correctly.
All right, let me play some more here.
So Richard Dawkins believes this because not enough people have prayed for him?
Probably.
Okay, all right. I guess I can't disprove that.
Rhodocetus, see that the nostril has moved backwards.
Okay, he's saying Rhodocetus, the nostrils have moved backwards. First of all, does any animal in the world have the ability to move his nostrils?
Ben, could you move your nostrils again?
They're big nostrils.
Okay, so first, Kent is wrong about that, but I don't think that's what he means. I think he means, does any animal have the ability to move the position of its nostrils? Kent, you know that all dogs are related, at least you say that. I'm going to have to point out that the pug has its nostrils in a different position than, say, those of a Great Dane. So yes, even within a kind. So I don't know why this is an argument you're making. You don't make it about dogs. You don't mean for that. That doesn't mean that dogs aren't all the same kind. So apparently, this isn't a big problem. Just be consistent, Ken.
The nostril stories is a very fascinating one, Kent. In fact, on one of these icons, they didn't even find the nostril, and they just recently came out and admitted that with an interview that Carl.
I hate when they say they just recently came out and admitted that. Like, if you read the paper, they would have lied about what they actually found. And also, I don't care if some other whale species didn't have its nostril found. They're talking about Rhodocetus, and that's a Rhodocetus fossil skull. You know what I can see on that fossil skull?
What?
The nares. The bony nares. And yet, they've moved farther back up the skull as compared to Pakicetus.
Interesting.
So, some other whale where they didn't have the nostrils. I don't know what that's supposed to mean for anyone.
Werner did. He had some of these folks in a room and said, well, show me the nostrils. And they said, well, actually, we didn't find them. We found the lower jaw and how far it extended out. They have the upper part of the upper jaw, but not the extension where the nose would be. So they really have no idea.
So they find...
make
sure.
But they do have an idea for rhodocetus. It's right there.
Hang on, I want to make sure people understand this. They find the lower jaw, and you can't tell where the nostrils are from that. But again, you're still breathing into the nostrils and into the throat, which goes to the, you have to have an epiglottis. The trachea has to be connected.
How do you know that, Kent? You don't. Neither I nor you know whether or not rhodocetus had a connected trachea and epiglottis. I mean, I think the esophagus and the trachea were probably connected on rhodocetus, but you don't know that they weren't. You can't tell that from the fall.
The whales are totally different than that. So they didn't find any nostrils at all, but he's claiming the whale nostrils are moving backwards. So would you say this would be his lack of understanding of the truth? Is he deliberately lying? Has he fallen for the fraud, or why does he do this?
I think it's just like going in my backyard and saying, well, look, I found a golf ball, a baseball, and a volleyball in the dirt. And look, it proves that one evolved to the other. Well, no, it doesn't. It just proved that you found 3 different sized balls.
And it proves that you guys don't understand evolution, so you can't effectively argue against it. Look, as a rule of thumb, if you ever want to argue against anything, you should be able to give an account of the thing you're arguing against that is at least sufficient that you're someone who accepts whatever that is would say that, yes, that's a fair definition of what it is I'm arguing for, as I accept her. So, like, let's say you want to argue for or against a particular political position. You have to be able to articulate that political position in a way such that its adherents would accept that as that being their position. These guys can't even begin to understand evolution. So they can't argue against it, because all they're arguing against is straw man, has only the vaguest of resemblance to actual evolutionary.
That's all. So I think it even gets worse when you go to rhodocetus, which is his next icon there, and I can't hear the video too well, but that's the next one he's getting to.
Does Kent know he's on camera?
Think so. He's usually on camera for these whacking atheists. Although, I said, this one has a much lower production value than normal.
He's like playing with his toy.
Yeah.
While this guy's talking to him.
And also, I'm noticing that there's a dinosaur head foot right above his head, and it's got this thing that sometimes you see, especially in kids' art, where the toes are clutching something. Step forward, but dinosaur feet probably couldn't. Most dinosaur feet probably couldn't do.
Yeah, but this isn't Dinosaur Land, it's Dinosaur Adventure
Land.
Right.
It's more adventurous if they can do that.
Right. Yeah.
Dark Knight Apologetics just knocked himself out from a bad face palm. Hey man, check the link for the merch store in the description and buy yourself a Dapper On Set brand pillow. Will protect yourself from that. You can just put the pillow on your hand. Whenever you go to face palm yourself, instead of knocking yourself flat, get a light little bump with a pillow.
No oven mitts available yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to get those. People have a place that I can actually put in an oven mitt design and they'll just make them to order. Please let me know. I can't currently order a stock of inventory to then sell to people. That's not currently an option for me. That may change at some point, but right now I can't do that. If you know of a place that'll do made-to-order custom oven mitts, let me know.
If someone can donate $100,000 to the channel, then he could probably do that. So
that's true. Yes, that is true. Please, though, unless you just really don't have anything else to do with that money, don't do that.
On 3 fossils that were found in the early 90s, again in Pakistan. I guess Pakistan is a really whale-rich area for fossils here. But the problem here is Gingrich is the same guy who found Pakicetus and became famous for
Gingrich?
it. He actually redacted his position again on rhodocetus. Here he finds these 3 different fossils. The books go crazy. The textbooks, the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, they all start publishing Rhodocetus with a fluked tail. Then Carl Werner interviews Gingrich. They have this on video. You can go to YouTube and watch it. And he asks them, well, where'd you get the fluked tail? Because I was studying the fossil right here you have in front of me, and I noticed it doesn't have a fluked tail. In fact, you don't even have where the fluked tail would attach to a ball vertebrae. So what gives there? So we asked Gingrich this question, and he says, quote, he says, well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebrae indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
That's a reasonable thing to speculate.
So here again, we have books and museums running crazy putting flukes on Rhodocetus.
Yeah, but not this museum. This one didn't. Here, let's see if we can find it. Where am I right now?
2027.
In the water because it ran so, and it was originally found by this young.
Yeah, look, there's Rhodocetus. Is the second one up. Bacchus, Rhodocetus, and Dorodon. This museum doesn't. So maybe it's not everyone just running crazy putting flukes on Rhodocetus. Maybe that's not what's happening.
Again about the flippers and said, well, look, I understand you've got Rhodocetus here, you've got its flippers, tell me how you got to that. And then, well, Gingrich says, well, since the original discovery, we've found more forelimbs, the hands and the front arms of Rhodocetus, and we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can spread out like flippers on a whale. So now he's redacting the flippers and the fins that they put on museums everywhere and books everywhere with Rhodocetus swimming around. And now he says, you know what, based upon these forelimbs that we've now found subsequently, there's no way it could have had flippers or fins. They didn't have the kind of arms that could spread out and be useful like a flippers on a whale. So its fluke is gone and its fins are gone. And without a fluke and fins, you pretty much don't have a whale anymore, or even an in-between.
All right, let me play some more here.
Backwards on the skull, backwards along the snout. Now if you look...
And the thing with the flippers is the same thing. Like, this museum didn't have flippers on them. I've never seen a Rhodocetus reconstruction with whale-like flippers. I've seen them with, like, webbed toes. But, I mean, an animal can get webbed toes in a single mutation in a single generation. That's barely a change. So, I'm not sure what the point of that was, except to say that, hey, did you know that science updates its understanding with the increase in available data?
That's impossible.
Not only is it impossible, it's apparently a bad thing, because we want science to just get a wrong answer and stay wrong. Because, I mean, screw technological development.
At a modern whale, that's a dolphin, a modern dolphin, you see that the nostril is right up near the top of the head. That's the blowhole. The nostril has moved right backwards. Now, really surprising...
You know, we can stop it there again, Kent. The interesting thing about Dorodon, you know, that we do have about 50 of...
Which, that wasn't a Dorodon skull, but okay, let's keep going.
Those that have been uncovered in various, you know, levels of completion in the fossil record, they're simply extinct whales. There's no big deal there. Some of them are about 50 feet long. They've got nostril openings. They've got blowholes on tops of their skulls. They're just straight up whales. There's nothing about them that would look transitional. They're just an extinct version of whales. Like, we have extinct apes, we have extinct mammals, we have extinct types of bears.
So here's the thing about that, though. Let's take a look at an actual Dorodon skeleton. This has been slightly altered. And of course, there's some reconstruction. Take a look at this Dorodon. So, okay, here's a few things. We've got actual full hind limbs, unlike modern whales. All the bones of the limb are there. Okay, we don't have a blowhole, because, hey, look, the nose is still pretty darn anterior on the skull. Okay, well, let's see. We don't have a melon, like modern odontocetes, or the toothy whales. but this is a toothed whale, but no melon. Okay. We also have heterodont dentition, unlike modern toothed whales, who have teeth of all the same shape and basically the same size, because they're primarily eating fish. Basically, the only thing about this that actually makes it look like a modern whale is the pelvic girdle. That's it. This is not just a modern whale. This is clearly more primitive than any modern whale. Now, it's much closer to modern whales than, say, Pakicetus was. But still, this is not a modern whale by any stretch of the imagination. Like, could you just stop lying about animals? Maybe? And, like, normally I would be like, oh, well, maybe you're just not sure. But at this point, you've gotten so much wrong that I have trouble believing you looked into this, and then either you're lying about looking into this, or you're lying about the actual fact. Either way, you're being dishonest.
And we have extinct types of whales. Noah's flood was a catastrophic thing, and not all the animals made it through. So they're in the fossil record. We have about 50 of them. No big deal, but they're not transitions.
Well, but he's got a line between them on the.
I mean, they obviously are transitional because they're morphologically intermediate between more land-capable archaeocetes and modern, fully aquatic cetaceans. Now, granted, Dorudon was probably fully aquatic, but it was still much more like land-dwelling ancestors than modern whales are. I mean, that skull was barely derived.
I mean, here it is. The Nebraska Museum has a line between them. Isn't that proof? Hang on one second. Yes, sir?
No one thinks the line is the proof.
Nobody.
The lines represent a conclusion based on the evidence.
Got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Right.
What were the hind limbs like on that particular animal?
On the
last one, the one you're talking about.
the one they found 50 of, did they find evidence that had a fluke on the back, or like a tail of a whale?
Or did it have hind limbs?
Did it have hind limbs?
I'm not sure specifically about that one. It did not have hind limbs. It's very much...
Oh, it didn't have hind limbs, huh? Dorudon didn't have hind limbs? Hey, you know what this is? This is a picture.
Hind limb.
Yeah, this is the picture of a left pelvis, femur, tibia, fibula, metatarsals, and tarsal bones, and a patella from Dorudon.
And it's giving Kent the finger right now.
Well, the toe. So,
it did what it could.
Dorudon has hind limbs. So you're just lying about it.
A whale, it's got a blowhole, it's got...
I don't know if it had a blowhole, but it sure didn't have its nostrils on the top of its head. You just checked that skull, and it didn't.
On the top of its head, it's just very much a whale, but not a whale that we have alive today.
As far as we know, it's an extinct whale, which is there's a lot
as far as we know.
Yeah, it's an extinct whale, but it's an extinct whale that's transitional between other extinct whales and modern cetaceans. Other extinct whales, which exist farther down in the fossil record, makes it a prediction of the theory of evolution, and therefore evidence for that same theory.
Thousands of examples.
We do have 50 of them, so yeah. So there's a pretty good idea. They're about 50 feet long, some of them, and but the Dorudons are just whales.
So
nostril openings, blowholes right on the top of their skulls.
Right.
It just says it right there. Nostril openings right on the top of the skull. We just looked at the skull. That's not even close to true. Like,
I don't know what they were looking at.
I think they were looking at this picture and decided it looked enough like the whales at the top of the picture that they could just pretend it was one and they didn't have to look at it.
Yeah, I guess.
That's probably the least dishonest version of what they could possibly be, or why they could possibly be saying this. Because every other option I can think of is less honest than that.
To go from a wolf-like creature to a 50-foot long, that'd be a big wolf, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I don't have the scrolls wrong thing loaded up in the OBS. Sorry.
One other point on that, Kent, that's real interesting is that, do you know that Darwin himself saw a black bear swimming around and eating insects in its mouth, and so he was actually the first one to come up with the mammals turned into whale idea.
I hate it every time. Oh, so by the way, Money Bitch, this is not actually a debate. This is more of a live debunk. I have a Kent with Bent series where we go on and we live debunks of Kent Hovind stuff. And we do Kent Hovind because he is so bad at all of these topics that I can debunk him live without... Yeah. Like some other creationists, I would have a little bit of a tougher time. Like if I wanted to try and debunk like Hugh Ross's understandings about evolution, because he gets some stuff wrong. He's a lot smarter than Kent Hovind, and I would have to do a lot more work. Like I could do it. And hey, No Name, welcome. Welcome. Glad to have you.
And in his opinion, it wasn't even just bears in general. It was specifically black bears that he thought that they came from. But when you look at the original creature that...
I mean, I'm not going to... What do you want me to say? Charles Darwin was wrong? Okay, Charles Darwin got a lot of things wrong. But what does it matter? No one believes that whales evolved from more primitive artiodactyls because Charles Darwin thought they evolved from... What Charles Darwin said or thought doesn't matter anymore.
Even evolutionists today say they came from, they're completely split. The California Academy of Sciences, that's responsible for putting together all the museum exhibits in San Francisco and other places today, they claim pretty emphatically that they believe the early ancestors of whales was a hyena-like creature. And then you've got Gingrich saying, no, it was an antelope, and other people saying, no, the genetics and the molecular stuff show it was a hippopotamus. But
okay, well, here's the things, right? So it was a primitive artiodactyl, and antelopes are actually somewhat primitive. I mean, they don't have any super highly derived things, I guess the horns. But saying that it was like a hyena and like an antelope is actually not too far off because it was a meat-eating artiodactyl. So if you smush a hyena together with an antelope, you know what you kind of get? A meat-eating artiodactyl. So yeah, calling it like a hyena and like an antelope, not that far off. So I don't know what the problem with that is. Like, why is that bad? Why does that not work?
You know, you would think if there was a clear trail of evolution that they would have that answered, but even the leading evolutionary places still can't decide on the imaginary creature that they originally came from.
Well, first, no one ever puts on actual cladograms that are put in, like actual... They don't put extinct forms at the nodes on cladograms, because you can't be certain that any extinct form actually is the very ancestor of later forms. It might simply be a related species to it, which actually puts it on a side branch on that cladogram, which is where we actually... In fact, chances are that that's what you found. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a good idea as to what the basal-most ancestor of sapiens and whales was. We do have a pretty decent idea. We haven't currently found an animal that fits the description. But, okay, we found animals that fit the description of other expected transitions. The fact that we haven't found a particular transitional doesn't invalidate the transitional nature of the other forms that were found as predicted. The fact that not every available prediction has currently been satisfied doesn't invalidate previous predictions that have been. That's not how it works.
Well, and I point out, I say, guys, this is obviously not science, this is imagination. So why is everybody required to pay for this to be taught for all the kids to learn? Who pays for the University of Nebraska to put these displays up here? Who paid for this anyway?
Probably tuition and donations. That's how most colleges get their money. But I bet some public money went into there too. I don't really want to get into politics, but like, schools should teach things that are, at least in science class, schools should teach things that are science, and this is science, and creationism isn't. Even if it were true, it still wouldn't be science.
Yeah, taxpayer dollars, I bet.
Yeah, this is tax-funded religion is what it is. All right, let me go some more here, Dan.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not a religion.
What is the most closely related to modern whales among modern animals? And the answer, astonishingly, is the hippopotamus.
It's not that astonishing. It's semi-aquatic artiodactyl. I mean, if I had to pick which artiodactyl was most closely related to whales, it's probably the one I would guess. In fact, I've seen people guess that it's hippopotamus without knowing. So, I don't know why that's astonishing. Have any idea why it's astonishing?
No. You know what's astonishing is the things that Kent's saying. It's baffling. Kent looks like he had a stroke. I look like I had a stroke right after you typed that out, no name.
I noticed that you were seeming a little bit dazed by, like, what is going on here?
What on earth?
I still don't know how you watch these with me while being so...
I don't watch them ahead of time.
This is actually the first one that I watched all the way ahead of time. Usually I just watch them just far enough ahead to cut out all the nonsense at the beginning.
I don't watch 1 second of them ahead of time.
Okay.
So I only have to see it once.
That does sound better. Maybe I'll make you do the editing next time.
I also don't watch the Kent with Bent videos.
I watched some of them. I watched.
So I had one on once. I'm like, what is that? Why is that my voice? What's going on? Oh, it's a Kent with Bent. I think it was number 5.
Okay.
Check out video number 5, guys.
I watched them over sometime, usually to see how terrible I became after, like, towards the end when I had a few drinks in, or 5, whatever.
Hippopotamus is closely related to the modern whale. What on earth? What is wrong with this guy's brain cells?
Yeah. Well, you know, broadly speaking, they just go out. The predominant opinion is that these things called ancient artiodactyls, and that's just a collective term meaning even-toed animals. Right.
No, it's not. Okay, so artiodactyls are ungulates, mammals that, you know, walk on the tips of their toes, which includes parasadactyls, like the horses and the tapirs and the rhinos, and other extinct things like chalicotheres. Okay? But the difference is not in the number of toes. Now, if you stick to modern animals, yeah, it's basically true that if it's an ungulate and has an odd number of toes, it's a parasadactyl. If it has an even number of toes, it's an artiodactyl. But there are ancient parasadactyls with 4 toes, and there are ancient artiodactyls with 5 or 3. The difference is that artiodactyls carry their weight evenly between digits 3 and 4. That's like your middle finger and your ring finger. Parasadactyls carry the majority of the weight on digit 3, and some of them, like the rhino and the tapir, carry additional weight split between digits 2 and 4, but the majority is still carried on digit 3. It's not the number of toes, it's the weight-bearing arrangement of the toes that's important. This is, like, unless you're talking to babies, don't get the distinction between different animal taxa wrong. Or unless you just don't know, in which case maybe you shouldn't be talking about it.
And they put a lot of different, mammals in that group, and it includes goats, sheep, camels, pigs, things like that, or cows or deers. But that's the idea and where it comes from. But then if
I notice you didn't mention hippos, which are also artiodactyls.
If you were to, to really pin an evolutionist at the California Academy of Sciences, they would say, well, it's a hyena-like creature, and then Gingrich says, well, it was Pakicetus, and then 20 years later he says, well, it's an antelope. So again, we have the same thing, that the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge, and without that, people are going to be left to their...
If the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge, you must not have very much fear of God, because you guys know almost nothing.
Boom! Roasted!
Yeah.
Their own skepticism.
All right, 40 more seconds of Dawkins. If you can not puke, let me play it, okay?
Which is classified in the even-toed ungulates, the cloven-hoofed animals.
Dawkins did it too. Dawkins, stop calling them even-toed.
Flipping me off.
Get it right.
So what we now believe is that there was an ancestor which was a cloven-hoofed animal.
I'll take cloven-hoofed. That works. That's even biblical. You know how the Bible says that the clean animals are the animals that chew the cud and have cloven hoofs?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's the scientific group of ruminants. All ruminants have cloven hooves and they chew the cud. The Bible also says that camels don't have cloven hooves, even though they do. It also says that rabbits chew the cud, even though they don't. But hey, it got really close.
Yeah.
Before 55 million years ago, a little bit before that, the ancestor gave rise to other cloven-hoofed animals. And then later than that, there was a split between the lineage leading to whales and the lineage leading to modern hippopotamuses. It's molecular evidence as well as fossil evidence that shows that hippos are the most closely related modern animal.
Yep, the genetic links between hippopotamuses and cetaceans are pretty obvious.
Now hold it. He said there's molecular evidence that they're related. What they're doing, they're looking at DNA sequencing and things like that, not even realizing this is pretty obvious evidence of the same designer.
You know, it's funny because Kent admits that if he took a DNA test, it would show that he has significant Norwegian ancestry. But how does he know that he wasn't just designed by someone who really liked to also design Norwegians, randomly popped him into the United States?
He doesn't know.
Right, it's the same argument. The same reasons, Kent, that you can trust that DNA tests would place you as a Norwegian and that corresponds to your actual ancestry is the same way that we can look at, say, hippopotamuses and cetaceans and look and say, hey, they share genetic markers which are unique to this group, not to other groups. I mean, you can say...
He just has no idea what he's talking about.
It's true. And the thing is that if it were a common design, common designer, then you would expect similarities to be primarily in areas where the DNA is actually going to make a difference, and there to be essentially no particular need for similarities in areas that don't actually matter. But one of the interesting things is that neutral DNA, things like non-coding or second position base pairs and codons, they actually show a stronger correlation to the morphologically derived cladogram than does the entirety of the genome. Because the rest of the genome actually faces selection pressure, but those parts don't. And so while they do in fact evolve more rapidly, they also they actually give a better tree. They're more obvious that there's a relationship, which is the exact opposite of what we would expect given non-common ancestry for these organisms. We expect these areas of the genomes to essentially be random when compared to other groups.
Steve, you do a lot of work with computers. How many lines of code from Microsoft PowerPoint are identical to lines of code from Microsoft Word? 80%. 80%. Identical lines of code. Does that prove they all came from Morse code or that explosion in a print shop? Or no, the same guys are writing the code. It just boggles my mind, Dan, that they can believe this kind of stuff.
It does boggle your mind, Kent.
Any comments?
Well, Kent has an easily boggled mind. I want to see Kent Hovind play Boggle. But he'll just go into a...
I don't want to see that.
Any comments here?
No, I think, here's one of the unique junctures where I would actually agree with Charles Darwin, who said that if my theory is true, he said, we should expect that the future is going to reveal all kinds of transitionary fossils. The ground's going to be filled with them, and every geological layer is just going to reveal it. Well, you know what? Swing and miss. It didn't happen. We've been
I mean, except that it did exactly that happen.
Besides that.
Yeah, besides the actual transitional fossils that you've actually seen in this video. You actually saw the bones. It wasn't just the drawings. Yeah, besides all that...
There's a picture of the bones, but yeah.
No, Dawkins actually... Well, I guess the video itself was picture of the...
Right, yeah. There's a video of the bones.
I guess Kent didn't physically go to Nebraska. Although, to be honest, I don't know that I would want to go to Nebraska, so I don't think I can blame Kent for that one. Sorry, Nebraska, but, it's cold.
Collecting fossils for over 150 years more since he said that. And we would expect, if this story is true that Dawkins is saying here, we should have some pretty clear transitions. If you're going to go through 21 morphological changes to go from a mammal to a whale, you better have a very, very clear trail of breadcrumbs. But
yeah, we do. That's nice.
They don't have it. They've got inferences, cladograms, and drawings.
Like who says, they just got cladograms. Yeah, those are based on character analysis that's very careful and usually involves a lot of characters. This isn't just some random nothing.
So they think just like a group of guys are like, all right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to fool everyone because the devil's controlling us, and we're just going to draw a whole bunch of lines on paper and then draw little animals in between and just say that's what happened.
Yeah, basically.
They think that's what people do.
Yep.
It's like they have just no idea how much effort someone could put into something like that. Not just someone, but like lots of people over a long period of time.
Well, it really is. It's a matter of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where basically you learn a little bit about a subject, but not enough about a subject to know how much there is to the subject. So you figure that you probably know a lot about it. And so you vastly overestimate how much you know about it. So,
right.
And you see that a lot with people who are just starting out at things, right? Like,
oh, that's me in nuclear field A school. I mean, I used to build and repair computers in Hickville, Wisconsin, and people came in and could barely speak English. And these are people who only spoke English. Like, there were some not smart people, and I thought I was pretty smart. And then I went to nuclear field A school and realized, holy crap, I'm not at all smart, and I have to study 6 hours a day just to barely get by.
Just getting through that means that you're definitely smarter than most people.
Well, but the point is it was an eye-opening experience as to how intelligent some people can be.
Uh-oh. The devil's making Monk Mayfair draw lines. Make sure he doesn't connect any, Monk Mayfair, stop before you connect any fossil whales to any modern whales, because that would just be crazy. Cast out the devil. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It is a thing where, like, they don't realize how much there is that they don't know. I actually do think that that's the case. I mean, I know they're being dishonest, but I also think that they don't even comprehend how much there is to
that hypothetically connect these creatures, but the evidence isn't there.
All right, 7 more seconds. Hang on here. Well, that was it. The Richard Dawkins Foundation, he wants us to believe. Now, I have hours and hours of stuff I could put together.
How many tabs does he have open?
Oh. He's doing high IQ research.
Hours and hours of slides I could put together showing exactly what you talked about, that this stuff has all been disproven. There are many quotes saying it's not true.
Yeah, many quote minds. There's a difference.
But they still teach it in the textbooks as if it's true. I was speaking at the Arkansas House Representatives Committee that was selecting textbooks, and I went through about, I don't know, 15 or 20.
He's like, oh, I said all these things aren't true. And then the other person said, well, if we take him out, what are we going to replace him with? And he's like, oh, that's not my problem. Just don't teach the lies, except that probably never happened.
Millennials these days are gathering their truth and their worldview mostly through social media. And if you can't bake things down to a short, compact YouTube video and get it in 90 seconds, oftentimes they're not willing to sit down and wade through a 400-page creation book. So we've really been putting out a lot of our ministry tools on YouTube. For example, we just spent about 13 weeks developing a video on Noah's flood, on what happened specifically on the North American continent just with Noah's flood. Spent 13 weeks on it, released it on Friday. It's now got 40,000 views with hundreds of thousands of minutes of
Congrats,
people
dude.
by making short, impactful videos, releasing.
There's a lot of things that he teaches. This whale evolution is only...
All right, I think that's pretty much it. I don't remember him actually saying anything else that was interesting, which basically means we finished the Kent Hovind video.
What?
Yeah, and we did it in less than 2 hours.
That seems unlikely.
Well, it was a shorter video.
But I did have a whale of a time.
Oh! So clever. All right. So, yeah, that was the guy, Dan something or other, who is the head of Genesis Apologetics, which you might recognize from my Genesis Apologetics Should Apologize series of videos, which, by the way, the next episode should be the final episode in that series. It will mean that I will have gone through all of the John and Jane videos.
If that's their real names.
I don't think it. But it's the names of the characters. So, yeah, let's see. Go visit coppermagma.com for more of the music by Ben Hovind and his band, Copper Magma. Bent, of course, is the one who did the music for my intro. So if you like the intro, check out coppermagma.com. Let's see. Bento, is there going to be a Mass Effect stream on today?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, there may or may not be a Mass Effect.
There's a CBAD show. There's a CBAD show I linked to.
That's true. A CBAD show is coming out today. It is The Room. We watched Tommy Wiseau's 2003 film. You can call it that. The Room. It is... If you haven't seen The Room, I suggest you go watch it, and then you watch the CBAD show episode of it, because it is an amazing piece of... That is definitely
it's something else.
It is. Basically, what I can say is The Room is basically like, what if a director made the wrong choice every choice? And then put it out on film and had people watch it. That's what The Room is. Dark Knight Apologetics. Look, the fact that that's the last episode of that particular series doesn't mean it's the last time that I'm going to do something with Genesis Apologetics. In fact, I've done other things with Genesis Apologetics, like the 1,000 subscriber special. Remember that the worst creationist video ever, the one about like the Earth being in a black hole or something, and like none of it made any sense? Yeah, that was Genesis Apologetics. So, yeah, it was pretty bad. Let's see. I will be working on the next Genesis Apologetics. I'm hoping it'll be out sometime on like Tuesday or something. Don't currently have any more streams planned, but there will be some. I mean, around the channel. Like this video if you can, please. It really helps. And if you really like all of this, check out the links in the description, because there's a merch store and a Patreon, as well as an Amazon wish list. Any of that stuff is a really big help, because YouTube is fickle and I can never predict what's going to happen. But with those things, it's easier to predict. So, yeah. I'm really grateful for everyone who's coming in, all the super chats, my patrons. You guys are all amazing. And everyone who just likes and shares a video, you guys are amazing too, because that is how YouTube knows to send my videos to new people, so I can get new subscribers, so I can get new people. So, yeah, seriously. And also, I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Bent. And with that, I will leave you all. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, whatever.
Bye, everybody. Goodbye.